Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, where we look into the many facets of the job, the career, and the lifestyle of investment and insurance product wholesaling. I'm your host, the creator of the Awesome Wholesaler Experience, and yours truly, Awesome Mike. Hey, we have a very special guest on today, actually a mentor of mine for almost 2 decades now. A little bit more indirectly lately, but was definitely part of my wholesaling development, if you know what I mean. Let me just get right into his bio. He earned a Bachelors of Business Administration and Operations Research from Bowling Green State University, one of my favorite schools to visit. That wasn't it, though. He went on and got an MBA in Business Administration and Management from Northwood University and a Doctorate of Business Administration. That's a DBA, ladies and gentlemen, from Lawrence Technological University, where he is an adjunct professor, adjunct, I think is the right way to say it, on global organizational and developmental change. That's very impressive. He is currently a certified business and executive coach, a keynote speaker, and a trainer. And my favorite quote by him is this: the things that we accept to be self-evident become the biggest hurdles to our success. He is the one, the only, Dr. Fadi Baradihi. Hey, Fadi, welcome to the show. Good morning. How are you today?
Good morning, Mike. I'm great. How are you?
I'm awesome. Thanks for asking. You might get the awesome thing a couple times here today. But, before we get into this, I want to ask you a question. And the question is, it's one that's been asked many times by many different people. And I'm just interested to get your opinion on it, knowing your background and kind of your history a little bit. Question is this, Fadi: who is John Galt?
The man that moves the world. Are you baiting me there? Yeah, John Galt is, depending on what you believe in from an, political and philosophical and economic perspective, is the invisible hand that moves the free market, right? It's the free exchange of people who are free to make their own decisions. John Galt, in theory, is hypothesized to make that system work. And I didn't know we're talking economics and philosophy today, but hey, you want to go there? Let's go.
I am confident that you can handle any conversation or question that is brought up. I thought you might find a little bit of humor that I dug that one out of the bag and brought it to you. I appreciate you addressing that and being so academically astute. But can you tell us a little bit about, how you were brought up? Like what inspired you as a child in your development to seek out this, super high level of education? And maybe who were some of your mentors in life? But tell us about a little Fadi Baradihi.
So was born in Lebanon. My father and mother, as kids, dealt with the Civil War, and a small family in a small town in South Lebanon, and as life got in the way and the economic condition wasn't conducive to them continue their education, they stopped early, and my dad became a commercial diver, and he traveled all over building harbors. And, then at one point when I was my early teens, decided to settle in Dubai in the Emirates and start his own company and doing underwater construction as a subcontractor. And my whole life watched my dad struggle, even though it's a sexy story, because, he'd meet with multinational corporations that are doing these massive projects, and not being an engineer, having to deal with 20, 30, 40 engineers on a project, always felt like he wasn't good enough, but outworked his lack of education and focus on his specialty, and kept with what he's good at. And always told me as a kid, don't ever put yourself in that position. So one of the things I do for my clients is help them identify patterns that they don't know about, that help them, that make them the person that they are. And that was one for me. So I strive to be the most knowledgeable, most educated, most up until one day I realized, as I advise my clients, it's time to monetize all that knowledge. There's a point in one's life where learning more is not going to make you more successful. Implementing what you know should become the focus, and that kind of spells out my life. Spent way too much time preparing, but life is good. Don't want to take any of it back, but the root of the person that I am is probably mostly attributable to the fact that I saw my father struggle the way that he did. And his advice for me was always work hard and be the smartest person in the room, or at least be at par with everybody else, because it's going to make your life easier.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome. And what a cool story, though. Like you said, it's a sexy story underwater, engineering, building things, and underwater diver. That's pretty cool. I guess there's no such thing as an above water diver. How did you come to America from Lebanon?
Yeah, so I came to college. So I grew up in the Emirates in Dubai, right? Because we immigrated because of the war, and my dad, as a kid, we'd be in Oman 1 year, we'd be in Qatar 1 year, we'd be in the Emirates 1 year, 2 years stints based on work, and didn't want the family to go through that. We had a home base in Lebanon, so we'd go for a while and go back to Lebanon, go for a while, come back to Lebanon. Obviously wanted some stability, so we ended up there. Came to college, bottom line. And as a person, autocratic systems and nepotism-based political and economic systems, I've always had an allergic reaction to them. And came here, experienced free market enterprise, experienced freedom, it's about who you are and what you do and what you can accomplish, not about who you know and what your last name is. And decided this is where I want to be. So I finished college and said, hey, Mom, Dad, I'm living here. I'm like, what? Our only son? And I did, and cut my own tracks and set my own path, and here I am.
Yeah, it's cool. I can recall one time when I was visiting one of the offices that you were running, and it had been mentioned that you had just returned from Dubai several times. So do you still go back to Dubai? Are your parents still there? And do you get to travel that?
That time was, my dad was sick, terminal.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Back and forth to see him. And then 4 months later, my mom followed. So I was back and forth that time, trying to spend time with them until they both passed away. So yeah, I don't go every other week anymore. That's kind of humanly impossible, but yeah, we do visit. We were there a few years ago. I have two sisters that still live there, so we do get back there. It's kind of a unwritten, they'll visit, we visit, they visit, we visit type of thing.
Well, that's cool. That's very cool. Kind of keep in touch with your roots and your siblings there. So Bowling Green State University, you knocked that out. I'm sure it was a pleasure. I know it's a very fun school to go to, and great things come from it. And then you came up to Michigan, and you got involved with the financial services industry, and it was very impressive. I mean, your resume, district manager for what was then called IDS or American Express, back from 91 through 97, and that was an interesting time for our economy. The Gulf War had just finished. Can you take us back to then and tell us, what was attractive about the financial services business to you, and how did you wind up, becoming a district manager there at American Express?
Yeah, so my two aspirations in life was to be somebody in charge, right? As a kid, watch my dad own his own business, watch my dad, go through the entrepreneurial life, and that was attractive to me. And they also understood that preparation is key, and learning what needs to be done, and learning from, like they say in academia, being able to stand on the shoulders of giants is critically important. So money was always attractive to me. The investment world, I have a very analytical mind, and enjoy numbers and enjoy that part of it, enjoy selling, enjoy the kind of the mental judo that goes into making things happen. So started with real answer in that American Express Financial Advisors. Met with somebody I liked the person I interviewed with. He would have been my district manager. Started under him and decided to get into management and became a district manager at the time. And then there was some consolidation going on within the market groups, and went from being at an office to a region, which created more opportunity. And my boss at the time, the new boss, became my mentor, and my career took off from there.
Yeah, I also started at American Express back in the day. I was out of that Ann Arbor office where Dana Nelson and Jim Perriord and those guys, Sarah Murray, used to be Sarah Caudle, if you remember. Yep. And so it was a great place to start. They did a lot of great training for someone that wanted to get into the business. They had a great recruiting arm. And that's changed a bit. You probably are familiar, but that's changed a bit to where, to get a start in the business now is very difficult unless a senior person takes you under their wing individually, or you're going to go with a big insurance agency, which is kind of what that was. Let's kind of fast forward then. So then things are going well for you at as a district manager at American Express. And then there was a big group of folks that left and formed their own business. And it was the Hans Group that had left American Express. No secret. In fact, Wall Street Journal front page, and a lot of the hit series, crime dramas and investment world were based on that departure, I'm sure. But it was very thrilling. And being someone, that was really in the room, can you speak to the thinking that causes someone to leave an organization as big and powerful as American Express and eventually Ameriprise is, to start their own? Was it John's entrepreneurial spirit, or did you guys collectively as a management team say, hey, we can do better for our clients? Kind of tell us a little bit, if you would, about the thought process to start the Hans Group and leave American Express.
Yeah, Mike, I'll share with you my perspective on it. So, using the American Express system, which worked extremely well all over the country, right? Very successful company. We, as a group, we wanted to do more. John Hans is a very ambitious, very entrepreneurial, loves to try things and loves to point to the outfield, so to say. And he pitched American Express on the idea of what we wanted to do. Get out of the kind of limiting offering and become a place that's more conducive to the types of clients that we wanted in the market. And incidentally, at the time, the Detroit market group was the #1 market group in the country. So to continue to grow and continue the pace of growth, we felt like something different needed to happen. It's a free country and within a free market. American Express decided that it's too disruptive for them. I'm not sure what their thought process was. And they decided not to allow, the market group to do what they wanted to do. And reciprocally, Hans decided that maybe we'll do it ourselves, and did that. And it was exciting times. It was I don't know about stressful, but it was very energizing, right? To go one day, 125 people, looking at everybody going, okay, what do we do now? And the group figured it out, and it's a very successful company, continues to be. And and it took that one, Winston Churchill says, stiff drink and a quick decision. And it was the beginning after the end. So,
yeah, and it's interesting. Both firms are arguably very successful. American Express has transitioned. The market group here in Metro Detroit does terrific. And the Hands Group has also carved out their own niche and have been arguably very successful along the way. You know, it's interesting too. I think that would be attractive to you. Was it attractive feeling like you would be, you know, in the real upper echelon? You would be in the C-suite of the firm as opposed to a district manager of this humongous firm at you know, American Express. Was the idea of you being the COO of Hands Group even more fulfilling to you based on, you know, the background that you mentioned about wanting to be the smartest person in the room and wanting to be, you know, be a somebody?
Yeah, you know, obviously with youth and inexperience, titles means a lot because it validates the ego. So yeah, it was important. In retrospect, what did it mean really? You showed up to work every day and did the best that I could, and you know, the people needed my support and they got it. My boss needed me to do things and he got it, and you know, did the best that I could and got recognized for it. You know, in retrospect, you look at it going, you know, what was I so excited about? But at the time, you know, feeding the ego with a title was extremely exciting and motivating. Yes.
Yeah, I can imagine so. And in fact, it was exciting when I would call on you guys, when I would go in there and train. You know, I really I felt proud to be able to work with folks like yourself and the others that were there because of the level of, you know, kind of the culture that you had. It was a high, I don't want to say high stress, but it was a very intense culture, very Detroitish, if you know what I mean. And, you know, the whole idea about grinding it out, you know, and they outwork everybody. And yes, we had some smart people, but we weren't, you know, in Michigan, we were not necessarily the, you know, call it the airy fairy conceptualize, what have you. It was like, hey, there's an idea, stiff drink, quick decision, let's get to work. And I appreciate that about you guys for sure. You know, so it's interesting. So you did that for quite some time. I mean, you were there from 97 until 2012. And then in 2000, I would suppose it'd be 2010-ish, you started another level of education. And you know, you started working on your doctoral degree and achieved that in March of 2012, if my notes are correct. But I got to pause here for a second. Now, for the folks that are listening and are not aware of the difference between a PhD and a DBA, DBA does not stand for doing business as in this situation. I'll kind of read off some notes I took because I actually was, you know, uneducated in this regard. People study a PhD program when they eventually want to become a full-time professor at a business school. Their goal is to become an academic and do research. These folks often come directly from the university undergrad program, and they start their PhD quickly after earning, you know, their baccalaureate degree. Now, accordingly, they are often still in their 20s and don't have much work experience. In contrast, people that do a DBA program, when they're already successful in business. You know, they do it when they have many years of success and they're looking for a new intellectual challenge. That is the definition of Fadi Baradihi, by the way. Looking for a new intellectual challenge. These people often have an MBA already, which you did, and they want to further distinguish themselves by earning this doctoral degree. Hence, these people are usually older than PhD students, and they have many years of work experience, tons of ambition and motivation. That sounds like it was written for you, sir.
Yeah.
Is that why you went ahead and got that you know, additional level of education?
Obviously, the reason for pursuing doctoral degree because one is it was the only thing left, right? And you know, my very heavily ingrained need to be prepared, right? So yeah, and the reason for DBA PhD is you know, at the time working 40, 60, 70 hours a week, did not have time to teach and do research and be an associate to my PhD sponsor, so to say, at a university. So I looked for a program that was executive-esque designed for, and that allowed somebody to, you know, manage your own time and not have to give up their career to go do that. There's other theories on the difference in PhD and an applied doctorate program, which the DBA is. PhD is it's a pure science philosophical degree, right? A DBA or an educational doctor, or some of the peripheral degrees that are third degrees, like a PhD, are for applied work. So if you specialize in business, those are theoretical definitions that if you do enough research, you'll see, if you're pure science, you're doing a PhD. If you're pure science, what are you doing? You're probably working at a university, teaching, and you get your degree for that. So yeah, my quest was more to continue to prepare. So I heed my dad's warning as an adult.
Very good. Now it sounds like this DBA program, it was perfect for you. But I want to ask you, you did this study, or you did this program based on a manufacturing company rather than what you had already put in, decades of experience in the financial services company. Was that intentional, or was that just by happenstance, or why did you do that?
So, you go through classes when you're doing a doctoral program, whether it's PhD or whatever. There's a class requirement where you study, obviously advance your knowledge within the realm of the specialty, in this case being business. And throughout it, obviously there's a lot of research, a lot of paper writing, because, that's what they do. They just have you write papers every week. And as you do your research, you kind of gravitate towards domains, in this case in business, that are attractive to you, right? What was hot at the time continues to be hot, is what's known as CSR, corporate social responsibility, and sustainability, and sustainable companies, and all of that. My interest was very focused on employee, just say organizational development, that deals with the effectiveness of the employees, and the inner workings and the relationships and all that. And a new domain coming out at the time was employee engagement. So I was interested in that, did my qualifying paper on that, and it was accepted, and did my research proposal on the influence of sustainability programs on employee engagement, right? So I kind of melded the two. There's always the problem is, who's your test topic? Who are you going to research? And through my relationships at Northwood, I was introduced to a gentleman at Dow Chemical Company that heads their sustainability program. So having an insider when you're doing a case study, which it would be, because it's one company focus, that could get you in touch with their employee engagement people and so on and so forth. And it was a global company, so it gave depth to the research, and that's how it came about. I knew what I wanted to study and what I wanted to contribute to the business world, and Dow was a company I had access to, and it worked out really good. I mean, I was able to research some of their people in China, Germany, Brazil, US based, and really got a good kind of a diverse research database that I was able to work through to find my conclusions, or my discoveries, I should say, define my discoveries.
So it wasn't just everyone in Midland, Michigan. It
Yeah.
was worldwide.
There's plenty of them, but it wasn't.
Yeah, so I dug into a little bit, and the work you did was very it's impressive, but it's also relevant to other business lines. Your findings identified 20 factors of sustainability that influence employee engagement, and those 20 factors are grouped into 7 different categories. If you'll allow me, I'll go through them quickly. One is culture, which is very interesting. That is one of, you kind of nonchalantly think, oh yeah, culture, but I want to talk about that in a second. communication and education, leadership and organization, business value, career, employees, and social responsibility. As you mentioned, that's the hot one today. Those are the 7 different categories. Fadi, can you tell us, is there a weighting to them? Is there one that's stronger or more important than another?
That's a good, bad question. I'll tell you why. I did a qualitative research study, which means that you discover the possibility of relationships between cause and effect. And if you look at the propositions that I made at the end of dissertation, and by the way, you should have told me, I should have pulled it out and looked at it if you're going to test me on it. But the propositions are about further research that needs to be done to quantify those relationships. Right? So in theory, you first do qualitative research to kind of build the framework and discover what needs to be studied, and then you recommend further research, which some of it has been done because I see notifications that someone quoted my paper every once in a while. And through the process of analyzing the data, you come up with propositions for future research that would, the next person looking to study the domain or some part of it, there's propositions that are already discovered that they could use, build a quantitative research paper around it and go test it. That would be, Likert scale type of, it would say culture has, 8 out of 10 impact relationship-wise on employee engagement, that type of thing. So I can't rank them based on the study that I did because it was pre that.
Well, what would your opinion be? And let's kind of even bring it home to what you're currently doing. A lot of the listeners on here are wholesalers, financial advisors. They're in that business, and they want to build a great and very employee engaging business. And the work that you've done can really help them. So if you were to give them some, quick thoughts on how to evaluate what their current situation looks like, should they look at culture? Should they look at the career potential, the business value? Or is there something that you would recommend they start with?
To test their employee engagement? Yeah, look for a model that makes sense for your business. So I'll give you some models as an example is say, stay, strive is one, right? So do people talk positively about the company when they're outside of work? Do they stay with you longer than the average in your industry? And do they do work that goes beyond their scope or what they get paid for? Those employees that do all 3 are engaged. Depending on how much of it they do, they're more engaged or less engaged. Employee engagement is not a thing, right? Because if you look at 10 companies and all of them having engaged employees, they don't look the same, right? So there's no model to say, let's plug everybody into this and it would work. The work that I do with my clients, if that's an issue, we start with, let's take a look at what your value proposition is for your company, not necessarily to the outside world, but internally. What values drive the culture? What do you want it to be? Usually the culture of an organization is a reflection of its founders' value system. And let's test or let's evaluate how much of that is pervasive throughout the organization, not only known, but also lived. Do people live the way that you would like them to? Usually, if we use the law of attraction, those people are going to be ones that are attracted in their organization. And naturally, if you share a belief in a value system, you are going to work harder. Much like we found out in the research at Dow, that at Dow Chemical, and with my dissertation, is that because a lot of people at Dow have such passion for sustainability, it theoretically caused them to be engaged because they felt they worked for a company that shares those values. So, in summary, employee engagement is an abstraction. It's a thing that you could use principally to design what you want it to be, and then build those experiences that allow people to increase their connection to the company, and therefore say positive things when they're not there, work harder than they should, and stay with you longer than average. Different other models, one is effective commitment to the company, how they feel about the company, how hard they work. So there's several models out there that have been developed by very large consulting companies, and I think they all work, but at the core of it is you can't make the engagement modality different than the culture. And the culture is driven by common beliefs, driven by what kind of what binds the company together, and you have to be able to adapt the model that you use to that, so that you're able to drive engagement without violating the culture or the value system of the organization. I'm not sure if any of that made sense, but I said it.
Well, you are definitely the smartest guy in the room, which is not saying much because it's just you and I here. But anyways, that was awesome. The say, stay, and strive concept is a great one. And I can see wholesalers and their managers using it to evaluate the sales team. Is there a lot of turnover in this team? Well, that means that people are not engaged. They are there for superficial reasons, and as soon as they're distracted, they leave. What are they saying? Is there are they broadcasting their esprit de corps verbally, and then the striving? Are they taking the effort to better themselves and to better the company beyond their scope of their responsibility for their job? That's excellent. I appreciate you saying that.
Mike, Mike, 1 second. The Say Strive is an Aon Hewitt model. So if anybody wants to research it, it's probably easier to find it under that. So Aon Hewitt is a consulting company. I don't think they're Aon Hewitt anymore. I think they're just Hewitt. But at the time, that's their model, assessment model for employee engagement.
Awesome. Thank you for saying that too. Your current business focus, Baradihi Business Performance, on there, you say that you focus on, and I'll just go ahead and kind of read it from your site here, but it talks about business and executive coaching, talks about business consulting, and then business training. And as I was preparing, it kind of rang to me a little bit in my head that maybe those are conflicting philosophies or conflicting subjects, meaning that the goal of the business owner usually is to increase profits. That's why they went into business for themselves, was to make money, and usually it's to increase revenues and reduce expenses. And one of those expenses is the business executive. And the business executive might have a different philosophy or a different reason to be working for this business or this business owner. Can you speak to the differences that you have to deal with when you're coaching people from those two, call them, I don't want to say polarizing, but different ends of the spectrum, the business owner as well as the business executive? Did I lose you, Fadi?
All right, I think we're back.
Yep, you're good.
So the question, just to clarify on the question, are you asking about the cost of the executive?
Yeah. Well, really, it's more about the difference in the philosophy and the conflict that you're seeing or that you might see, or is it even there, between the business owner and how to coach and develop them versus the executive and how to coach and develop them? Because aren't they conflicting a bit?
They could be, but ultimately, money is made in business through leveraging resources. Whether it's a piece of equipment, you pay $1 million for it, can you make $5 million before it craps out on it? You hire people, you pay them X amount, can you make money on them? So kind of what pulls it together and builds that synergy is that there would only exist if there's mutual benefit. right? So the conflict could be there at times, but the direction and the long-term vision cannot be different between, let's say, the business owner and their next in line executive, right? So that said, how do you best leverage human resources, not HR, but a human resource, a person? The best way to do it is to make them as effective as they can be within their own limitations, so that they can contribute the most. And that's where I come into play, is help people understand themselves, understand how they think, understand the kind of the ultimate turning point for any executive is once they start seeing themselves the way that the rest of the people in the company see them. Because as human beings, we have this great ability to explain the world to ourselves based on what we want it to be. The self-talk, we constantly talking to ourselves and explaining what we're seeing. That could be your best friend, it could be your worst enemy, depending on how honest your self-talk is, right? And once you're able to help somebody see themselves the way that everybody else sees them, that's usually a good point to say, you know what, I don't want to be this person. I want to be this guy I used to fantasize about. How do I get there? And I'm able to help them through that transformation. So the conflict between the two is kind of neutralized by the idea that if you have an executive that you pay a lot of money to, you have to have a return on that investment that is consistent with the risk of the higher expense. And really the best way to take advantage of that is make sure that that person is performing at the highest level and therefore contributing the most.
Is it possible to recruit people that are high performers and to kind of mold them into your organization and its culture? Or would you say that it's better to kind of grow these people, grow these high performers, both culturally and performance-wise, from their infancy, business-wise, into your culture?
To be honest and true to what I do, I'd say they can be nurtured to become high performers. But I think the reality of it is, some people are never going to reflect on themselves. Some people are never going to be vulnerable. Some people are never going to open up. Some people are all going to sit there and tell you, yes, you're right, I should do that, with no intention of doing it. They're not ready. Do I believe everybody's moldable if given the opportunity and the resources and the right nudge and push and the right understanding? Yeah. Do I think everybody wants it? No. And there's a big, the breaking through that, there's always a judgment call. Is it worth the time and energy and money for somebody that does not want to change? And, there's no good answer for that. It's very situational.
Well, let's break it down even further then. So if I have a team of wholesalers and their task is to go out and raise money, that's the bottom line, but of course represent the company, facilitate the culture, all those things are kind of intangibles that go along with that, raise the money. What we see in the industry is a lot of job turnover, where a wholesaler will have some success and be recruited away to a different company. And is that something that this company can prevent by doing something, or could you help a team to preserve their investment in that sales team? And then how often do you recommend, for a team to kind of prune itself and maybe replace or get rid of some of that, call it non-functional overhead that they have?
I mean, on the one hand, I'd say it's a contradiction to say non-functional overhead, right? Because if they're non-functional, they should not be overhead. And so, I don't have a recommendation as to how often they should prune. I do go on the philosophy of hire very slow and fire very quick when people are not performing. They show no interest in performing. The question for you is, the one of the questions that you posed there is how you prevent people from leaving, right? Got to remember, employment is a free market transaction. You trade value for value. It falls under the equation of, Mike, if you work for me, you're accepting the job, you must believe that the money I'm giving you is worth more than the knowledge and energy that you're giving me back. And I must believe that the knowledge and energy that you're giving me as your employer is worth more to me than the money that I'm paying you. Once that's disrupted, that relationship falls apart. Right? So, one of the questions you ask is, how do you hire? How do you make sure? I don't know. Can you ever find your wife on the first date? I don't know. It's a liar's poker, the interviewing process. But how, what expectations you set, what I would say pressure you put on, but what key performance indicators you measure and what you do will tell you very quickly whether someone is the right fit or not. But I would venture to say that very rarely is employment longevity based on anything that people do day to day. I do believe that most people want to stay with companies that make them better people, that push them to be the best version of themselves by teaching them, by giving an opportunity for growth, giving an opportunity to do bigger and better work. They stay with those companies, regardless of what the financial compensation and the job is. But when it becomes about a very linear, you produce or you can't work here, then any option is on the table, right? They can find someone else. I'll tell them, if I can spend 6 months with you and 6 months with the next person, I don't have to do anything, So,
Wow.
People staying with you is a lot more than given a job that's worth doing. You have to make them people that feel that they're worthy of your attention, worthy of your investment in them. Some choose me as that, or an executive coach as that, right? We'll invest to make you a better person by hiring this person to kind of work with you.
Yeah, that's awesome. In fact, I think a lot of the listeners on here will appreciate that mouthful of wisdom, and hopefully can employ it. There's a lot of turnover in the business, and I think that that's part of the reason why I started this show, was to try to give value back and help the wholesaler business survive. Some of the things that you write about or you continuously are quoted on are management styles and leadership styles. And you've got 6 types of management styles that were noted: autocratic, consultative, persuasive, democratic, chaotic, and laissez-faire. If I'm a hiring manager, if I'm an actual manager, maybe not just a hiring manager, but I'm going to build a team, what should I do? Should I look for folks that have the same responsiveness to my management style, or should I be able to be agile in my management style and tailor it to these employees so that I can work with a broader group of employees that might be more successful?
Yeah, I mean, there's no easy answer, right? When you're buying a car, what do? You think about, what type of car you want to drive, and you start kind of pruning your choices based on what's important to you. And I think if you approach hiring a manager in the same way, here's my strengths. Do I want somebody that's another version of me because it's working so well? That might be a good choice at one point. You might say, I'm good at 3 things. I'm not good at 4. I'm going to hire somebody that has those 4, and we're going to work together to lead. So it really depends on the situation. Most importantly, that decision or that thought process cannot be divorced from the needs of the organization.
That's the bottom line, is the needs of the organization.
It's not about you and who you hire. It's about what does the organization need.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So there's also a concept, leadership versus management. 2 different things completely. In your opinion, is it more important to have great leadership, or can you make up for a lack of leadership with great management? Which is more important?
Well, I think what's most important is having both skill sets, right? So you manage things and you lead people. And almost every business has things that need to be managed and people that need to be led, right? So every organization needs, I do believe every organization needs both I'll put that in quotation marks, because if you're a people-driven organization, you might just need leadership. If you're manufacturing, might need more management than leadership, but you still need leadership because you still have people working there. But that said, I do believe that the best single person to oversee is a leader with management skills. Then they can turn it on and off and be able to kind of tap into both sides of the brain.
Yeah, that's difficult. Some people would call that person a unicorn because it's very difficult. As Michael Gerber talked about in the E-Myth, even the military. I was in the Army for several years, and in the Army, you have a platoon of soldiers, which looks just like a sales team, if you know what I mean. And they have a platoon leader, and they also have a platoon sergeant. And the platoon leader is pointing to the outfield, talking about direction. And then the platoon sergeant, who usually has a lot of experience, is the one that facilitates it, kind of makes it happen. That's out there. Can someone really do both jobs, or do you think it's a worthy endeavor to bifurcate that and have two people that can reach even better heights? What's your opinion on that one? And maybe, Fadi, if you could even talk about like a sales team, you've dealt with and had experience with multiple different businesses, but in particular, the wholesalers and the teams that you've seen, what has been the best practice? Have they had both leadership and management, or have they had a strong player, a unicorn that can do both?
Yeah, I mean, if you're selling military systems, you probably need, you'll need both skill sets, because it's a very technical sale. It's a very, the explaining the product is not as simple as explaining an annuity, right? So it really depends on that leader, what that leader skill set needs to be, right? If you're leading people, I do believe that, contrary to a lot of people I've known in the past, I do think that you can't be distant from the core value proposition as a leader and be effective, right? You could be okay, but you can't be great. So that said, depending on what the underlying pitch is, are you selling chemical products that go into other products, or are you selling, wholesaler selling REITs as an example? That leader needs to be different. That sales team needs to be different, right? So, but suffice it to say that, if you want the short answer, I know you want, just tell me it's leaders. It's leadership. If you're leading people, you need to have leadership skills. What that means, we can get into that if you like. If you're selling engineered products that need to be explained, you might need a leader manager, or having a technical leader and a people leader. It really depends on the needs of the business.
Yeah, as well said. Appreciate that. So I read an article that you had contributed to, and it was about how to manage stress and avoid burnout. Now, it's a big topic today. I think a lot of it is due to the media. But ideally, there were three identified ways. They're not all inclusive, but three ways that you can kind of manage the stress and avoid the burnout. One is to delegate. And the second one is to actually exercise, like physically exercise. And then the third one was to unplug. I want to get your thoughts on these, because to me it seems like American companies really neglect these practices. If you go global, there's much more of an embracing of the exercises, and particularly in the unplugging. What do you think about America and the companies and how we manage stress?
Well, I don't think it's up to the company. I think every individual needs to manage their life, so to say, because stress isn't, I don't know what percent I would label it as, but most people's stress is at work and at home. Because I do believe that someone that can unplug carries it with them, brings home to work, work to home, And when you're in that modality, nothing's ever good enough, and stress is high because, you know, there's a feeling of loss of control and that type of thing. So I do think that everybody needs to do that for themselves. I don't think it's it's on the company to say, today at 4 o'clock, when you're done here, you have to go to the gym. No, that's a personal choice. So, you know, that said, what I think about America today, I think, you know, the most productive country in the world, most innovative. So they don't change a thing, but employees and people whose lives are highly stressed need to do something about it.
That's great. Now, could a company have an advantage if they did things to encourage, obviously, like gym memberships? Some firms are actually putting a gymnasium, you know, in the belly of their buildings. So I think America is starting to embrace it. I think the unplugging, you know, we still, you know, if you're going to take more than 7 days of vacation at one stint, you kind of get the stink eye from a lot of employers. Where if you go to France, even in Canada, you know, I'm not a professional at it, but I've heard that if you have a child in Canada, you get a year off, a year to be with that child during its first year, and then your job is secure when you come back. That would be unheard of in America. So do you think that employers can...
You really want to open that kind of worms?
Maybe not. Maybe that's for another show.
Yeah, anybody can take a year off. I just don't think that, you know, it's a personal choice that people make.
Yeah.
I don't think it should be government mandated. I think companies, based on how they value their employees, should choose, and employees should decide what companies they work for based on the, you know, the melding of that value system. So I don't think anybody's entitled to it, but everybody has a right to it. You just can't make someone else fund it. If I want to take a year off, I can take a year off.
Right.
I have no boss, but my clients might say, you know what? Good for you. I'm not paying. Okay, fair enough.
Exactly.
So,
you know, one other quick topic that was interesting that I read about, and I kind of remember remnants of it at Hans in dealing with them, is the idea of cross training and job rotation. You know, cross training supposedly reduces risk, improves employee engagement and satisfaction, and potentially even improves your business's support of customers and overall performance. What are your thoughts about cross training and job rotation? And then more in particular, could a wholesaler team or a financial advisory company do this?
well, yeah, so cross training, remember we said earlier, one of good ways to responsibility of the company is to create opportunity for their people to learn and acquire more skills and more knowledge to have a chance at advancement when opportunity arises. Right? Cross training is a great one because it benefits both. On the one hand, the learning employee is an engaged employee. On the other hand, really what it does increases capacity. It gives you more people that could do more of the work, so that if there's a spike in your business, you have the flexibility of allowing people to do different work because they've been trained. So it engages employees and it increases capacity for the firm. So that is good, right? It's good for everybody involved. Can financial advisors and you know, I do believe, take the financial advisory world as an example. And financial advisors are, you know, success is driven by ego. You know, have you ever met a successful financial advisor that's nice, right? They're usually, what makes them great is some narcissism, some ego, some drive to be bigger than their reality type of thing. You know, how do you take that person and cross train them to do paperwork or to follow up with underwriters? Yeah. So cross training makes sense, but it has to make sense. Situationally makes sense. You know, I do believe that I think one of the best things for financial advisors to get trained on is go sit in the underwriting office and see what the crap that you send in looks like and what has to be done to process it. You know, things like that. That's cross training, you know, to the extent that it provides people a better understanding that in business, there's codependence. Very rarely is there a single person, single process that produces something, at the end of the line. There's always codependence that happens. Someone does something that goes to somebody else, it goes to somebody else. So cross training in that sense is about understanding what you send through impacts other people and other people's ability to perform. And it's important to know what they go through and what they do for you to be able to do a better job, because a lot of times it's unintentional. I didn't know you needed these boxes checked. I didn't know you looked at them. That type of thing.
Yeah, and it's actually helpful. When I would have the opportunity to bring my internal wholesaler out into the field with me, and they kind of understood, okay, just because the map says that I can drive from point A, one office, to point B, another office, in 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes on I-75 at 4:30 in the afternoon. Okay, that's a long 10 minutes. So yeah, that's probably the way that a wholesale team can do the cross training is that way, or even having wholesalers travel with each other to kind of learn some different techniques is probably always helpful. It's always been helpful for me. So if we could talk about your, call it your ideal client. A lot of folks on the line here are going to really be attracted to your depth of wisdom and knowledge and your thoughtfulness, and may want to pursue you. What does an ideal client look like for you, Fadi? I mean, business consulting and business executive is pretty broad. Can you handle just about anyone?
Well, let's talk about business coaching to start with. I'd say 99% of my business is business and executive coaching, right? So business coaching, any business, $500,000 to 50 million of revenue. I know it's a really large range, but they all look the same, right? Their P&L looks the same, just more zeros at that level. It gets bigger than that, then you're probably looking at executive coaching, whether it's seating an executive into a new position or someone that's not performing as well as they could, or any type of executive performance improvement that's needed. I come into play. A lot of the work that I do is someone gets promoted to a higher position, help get them acclimated to the new position. Someone being considered, like last year, there was a actually publicly traded REIT that hired me. They had 3 up-and-coming vice presidents, and they wanted to make sure they're ready for the next level potentially. And I, worked with them, with that group. So once you get beyond the theoretical 50 million, it's more executive coaching. Now, anywhere from 10 to 50 million, you're getting both. I'm usually working with the CEO on their personal effectiveness while peeking into their business, helping them perform better within the business.
Which is your favorite? Do you like working with the smaller mom and pops that are doing, $500,000 or $1 million at their dental practice, or do you like working for the bigger organizations that are at that, call it 8-figure range and beyond?
What drives it is the person. Someone who's vulnerable, self-reflective, wants to do better, regardless of what the business or the size. The person decides for me, the person decides how much I enjoy working with them based on their own engagement and their own desire and their own vulnerability, their own self-reflectiveness, and everything that it takes to make them a good coaching client.
Yeah, that's a great clarity, and I appreciate the angle on that. You've done well. You've been super educated. You're a student of lifetime learning, I'm going to say, and you have all the accreditations formally for that. Your business is thriving. We talked a little bit in the pre-show warm up that you're in a very good place right now. What does the next version of Dr. Fadi look like? What are you striving for in the next 5, 10, 15 years with your business and your life?
Well, short term, doing what I'm doing. I spent my corporate years away from home, and having two little ones at home still and one that's ready to start college, I'm enjoying spending time with them. Life is good. I get to spend all the time that I want with them and do things as a family and that type of thing. So I'll continue to do that. Long term, I could see myself, training coaches, having an affiliate program, coaches that I support, building that part of it. When, I'm a very ambitious guy, but, I don't know. I don't have a set time frame. I know that's not very sexy, but I'm enjoying life tremendously right now. I'm enjoying the success of my business tremendously. The people that I help, my awesome clients, my awesome wholesaler interviewer. Life is good.
That's good. That's good. I was going to offer my crystal ball here so you could look into the future, but
I have my own. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, you do. You're looking handsome there. Hey, a couple of my signature questions for us, Fadi, as we wrap it up here. Appreciate your time. First one is this, and I ask this of most, if not all, the guests. So I'm looking forward to your answer. If you could pick the phone up, and on the other end of the telephone is a 23-year-old Fadi Baradihi, and you had 5 minutes, what advice would you give to yourself just out of college?
Pay your dues and do what I'm doing right now sooner. Earn the right to be able to sit with business owners and do it as quickly as possible. Arguably, I stayed in the world too long for no other reason than it was enjoyable. But compared to what I'm doing right now, I would tell my 23-year-old self, start your own business sooner.
It's American dream. American dream. All right, question number 2, Fadi. If you could have any superpower, which one would you choose, and what would you do with it?
If I have any superpower, I'd say the power to reach through the computer screen and choke you for asking that question.
Oh, no.
I'd say the power to roll back time, because I do know that the reality of the world is, retrospection is very powerful, and being able to give people a do-over so that life is better, I think would be the superpower I would love to have. What do you think of that?
Good answer. Good answer. Hey, we can wrap up with this one. I want to tell you thanks personally. I spent many of hours in your, I guess, in your presence and in your shadow when you weren't there, but you were there still. And you always had a very warm and genuine, still professional, but very courteous and very endearing style. And I know that not only do I appreciate that about you, but I'm sure that there are thousands of people that you've interacted with that also appreciated that about you. So just want to say thanks for that. And hey, thanks for being on the show today. Appreciate that, and appreciate your many years of leadership. And again, everybody pretty much appreciates you then. And it's also evident from all of the recommendations that you get on LinkedIn. I mean, I think you're running for office or something here. It's tremendous. I do wish you much fortune both now and in your successes in the future. As we say on the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, it's about the journey. And Dr. Fadi, we wish you well in yours, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Hey, thanks everyone for tuning in today. And if you haven't already done it, go ahead and click that little subscribe button and the little bell as well. So you'll be notified every time that a new episode of the show is released. Of course, awesome ratings and reviews are never expected, but they're always appreciated. Everyone, thanks again for tuning in. Thanks for supporting the show. And of course, thanks for being awesome. Good night, everybody.